She tried to steal a human's horse, but what he did next left her speechless. The desperate theft. Twin moons cast silver shadows across the rocky terrain. As Zara crept through the mountain pass, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air, her once proud ceremonial armor now hung in tatters, the intricate blue-silver patterns dulled by weeks of desperate survival. The Nexari exile pressed herself against the weathered stone wall, violet eyes scanning the valley below where warm lights flickered from a modest homestead. She had been walking for 3 days, without food, surviving only on bitter mountain herbs and melted snow. Her people, the Nexari, had once been the guardians of the stellar highways, but their homeworld of Nexus Prime had been consumed in the Great Purge. Now they were scattered across the galaxy, like cosmic dust, unwelcome on every world they touched. Zara's stomach cramped with hunger as she studied the paddock where several large, four-legged creatures grazed peacefully. The locals called them horses. She'd learned from stolen data fragments, fast, loyal, and capable of carrying a rider across vast distances, perfect for escaping the planetary patrols that hunted her kind. She slipped down the hillside, her bare feet finding purchase on loose stones despite her weakened state. The largest beast, a magnificent black stallion, lifted its head as she approached the wooden fence. Its dark eyes reflected moonlight as it watched her with curious intelligence. "Easy," she whispered in her native tongue, then switched to the broken human language she'd picked up. I must." Her hands shook as she worked to untie the rope that secured the gate. The knots were foreign to her, designed by human fingers for human understanding. Frustration built in her chest as precious minutes ticked by. Behind her, the homestead remained quiet, its occupant presumably asleep. Finally, the rope gave way, and she slipped into the paddock. The black horse snorted softly, but didn't flee as she approached. Its coat was warm beneath her palm, and for a moment, she felt a pang of regret. This creature trusted easily, much like her own people once had. She grabbed the beast's mane and tried to pull herself up, but her weakened muscles betrayed her. She slipped, landing hard on the ground with a gasp of pain. The horse danced nervously, and she tried again, this time managing to get one leg over its broad back. "You're going to fall and break your neck like that." The voice was calm, carrying no anger or alarm. Zara froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. Slowly, she turned to see a tall figure standing at the paddock gate. Human male, she noted automatically, though his features were soft in the moonlight. He held no weapon, made no threatening gestures. I must go," she stammered, switching languages mid-sentence as panic clouded her thoughts. The human stepped forward, and she tensed, ready to run despite her exhaustion. But he simply extended his hands in a peaceful gesture. "That's midnight," he said, nodding toward the horse. "He's not been ridden bareback by anyone but me. You'll end up with a broken spine before you make it to the road." His voice held a strange accent, melodic and unhurried. Mountain folk, she realized. They were known for their independence and dislike of authority. "Perhaps, if you're that desperate to travel," he continued, "stealing my horse won't solve your real problem." His eyes, she noticed, were kind despite catching her in the act of theft. "Come inside. You need food first." Zara stared at him, speechless. In the months since her exile began, she had encountered only hostility, fear, or indifference from the humans she'd met. This one offered help. "You could turn me in," she said carefully, sliding down from the horse's back. "There are bounties on my people." The human, Finn, she would later learn, shook his head. "Bounty hunters don't come this far into the mountains. Too much trouble for too little reward." He gestured toward his modest cabin. "Besides, you look like you haven't eaten in weeks. What good would reporting a dead alien do anyone?" Her pride warred with her desperation. The Nexari were warriors, proud and independent. They did not accept charity from anyone, especially not from the species whose governments had failed to intervene during the purge. But her body was failing. She could feel it in the way her vision occasionally blurred, in the tremor that had developed in her hands. Pride would not keep her alive much longer. "Why?" she asked, the word barely audible. Finn studied her face in the moonlight, noting the sharp angles of her cheekbones beneath pale lavender skin. the way exhaustion had carved hollows beneath her distinctive eyes, because, he said simply, everyone deserves a chance to live. Unexpected Mercythe cabin's interior was warm and simply furnished, with rough-hewn wooden beams and stone walls that spoke of generations of mountain dwellers. Zara stood awkwardly just inside the doorway, her every instinct screaming warnings about trusting this human male. Yet the scent of bread and herbs made her stomach clench with desperate hunger. Finn moved efficiently round the small kitchen, lighting oil lamps that cast dancing shadows on the walls. He was tall for a human, she noted, with calloused hands that spoke of hard work and copper-brown hair that caught the lamplight. His movements held none of the aggressive posturing she'd come to expect from males of any species. "Sit," he said, nodding toward a chair beside a stone fireplace where embers still glowed. "You're swaying on your feet." She wanted to refuse, to maintain some dignity, but her legs betrayed her. The chair was blissfully comfortable after weeks of sleeping on cold ground. Finn stirred the coals and added fresh wood, coaxing flames that began to chase the chill from her bones. "What's your name?" he asked as he worked at the stove, ladling something from a pot into a wooden bowl. "Zara," she replied after a moment's hesitation. There seemed little point in lies when he already knew what she was. "Zara," he repeated, testing the pronunciation. "I'm Finn." He set the bowl before her along with a chunk of dark bread. "Vegetable stew. Nothing in it that should disagree with your system." The consideration in that simple statement nearly undid her. He had thought about whether human food might harm her, had chosen something safe. When had anyone last shown such care for her well-being? She ate slowly, fighting the urge to wolf down the meal. The stew was rich with root vegetables and herbs, seasoned with something that reminded her faintly of the spice gardens on Nexus Prime. Finn sat across from her with his own bowl, eating in comfortable silence. "How long since you've had a proper meal?" he asked eventually. 6 days, she admitted. "Maybe 7. Time becomes unclear." He nodded without judgment. "And before that, scraps. Wild plants when I could identify them as safe." She met his gaze briefly before looking away. "I am not skilled at surviving alone." "What were you skilled at before?" The question was gentle, but it opened wounds she'd been trying to ignore. "I was a navigator," she said quietly. "I read the stellar highways, guided ships through the quantum streams between worlds. My people were the bridge builders of the galaxy." "Were?" The simple word held such weight. Zara set down her spoon, no longer able to stomach even the delicious stew. "The Terran Coalition and the Vegan Empire went to war. They fought over trade routes, resources, political influence. My people tried to remain neutral, to keep the highways open for all." Her voice grew bitter. Neutrality was seen as treachery by both sides. Finn waited, seeming to understand that silence was what she needed. "They burned our worlds," she continued. "All of them. Said we were too dangerous to live. That our navigation abilities gave unfair advantages to whichever side we chose." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "We never chose. That was the point." "I'm sorry," Finn said simply, 2 words. In all her months of exile, no one had offered even that basic acknowledgement of her loss. Human officials had processed her refugee application with cold efficiency. Station masters had grudgingly allowed her passage in exchange for work. Pirates and slavers had seen only opportunity in her desperation. But this quiet mountain farmer had simply said he was sorry, and somehow that meant everything. "Why do you live alone out here?" she asked, needing to shift the conversation away from her pain. "Choice," he replied. "My family's land goes back for generations. Good soil, clean water, far enough from cities that folks mostly leave you alone." He smiled slightly. "I like the quiet. No family of your own?" Something flickered across his features. "Had a wife. Cancer took her 3 years ago." He met her eyes. Sometimes being alone is easier than being lonely in a crowd. They finished their meal in companionable silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Finn stood and collected their bowls. "There's a room upstairs," he said. "Small, but it has a bed and stays warm. You can rest there tonight." Zara stared at him. "You would trust me in your home while you sleep? Would you hurt me?" She considered the question seriously. No, you have shown me kindness. Then I'll trust you. He paused at the bottom of the stairs. In the morning, if you still want to leave, I'll help you saddle Midnight properly. Teach you enough to not break your neck. And if I don't want to leave, then we'll figure something else out. As she climbed the narrow stairs to the small guest room, Zara felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. The bed was soft, the blankets clean and warm. Through the window, she could see the stars, different constellations than those that had shone over Nexus Prime, but beautiful in their own way. For the first time since her world died, she fell asleep without crying. Building Trust Dawn painted the mountain peaks in shades of rose and gold as Zara descended the wooden stairs, drawn by the scent of cooking food and quiet sounds from the kitchen. She had slept dreamlessly for the first time in months, her body finally allowed to truly rest without the constant vigilance that survival demanded. Finn stood at the stove, turning strips of what appeared to be plant-based protein in a cast-iron pan. He looked up as she entered, offering a small smile that reached his eyes. "Morning. Hope you slept well. Better than I haven't." She paused, calculating. "Since before the purge began." "Thank you. Coffee." He gestured toward a steaming pot. "It's not quite like anything you'd have had on your home world, but it helps wake up the mind." She accepted the offered cup, inhaling the rich, bitter aroma. The first sip was indeed unlike anything from Nexus Prime, but the warmth was welcome. "It's good," she said, and meant it. They ate breakfast together. The protein strips with eggs from his chickens and vegetables from his garden. Simple food, but prepared with care and shared without expectation. As they finished, Finn leaned back in his chair. "So," he said, "still planning to steal my horse?" The directness of the question caught her off guard. She had been avoiding thinking about her next move, reluctant to leave this pocket of safety and kindness. "I don't know," she admitted. "I cannot stay hidden forever. The planetary patrols will eventually find me. Maybe, maybe not." Finn stood and began clearing the dishes. These mountains are vast, and the authorities prefer not to waste resources on what they see as empty wilderness. "I haven't seen a patrol in over 2 years, but I cannot simply hide here like a parasite." Who said anything about hiding or being a parasite? He rinsed the plates in a basin of water heated on the stove. "Farm work is hard, especially for one person. Could use the help if you're willing." Zara stared at him. "You would employ me? An exile, an alien. I'd employ someone who needs work and seems capable of learning." He dried his hands on a rough towel. "Question is, are you willing to learn?" The offer was tempting beyond words. To have purpose again, to contribute rather than merely survive. But doubt not at her. "I know nothing of farming. My skills are in navigation, in reading quantum streams and stellar mechanics. And I know nothing of navigating between stars," Finn replied. "Doesn't mean I couldn't learn if I needed to. Come on." He led her outside into the crisp morning air. The farm was modest but well maintained, with fields of crops she didn't recognize, gardens bursting with vegetables, and paddocks where horses grazed alongside smaller creatures that looked like miniature cattle. "These are Highland ponies," Finn explained, approaching a group of sturdy, shaggy horses. "Hardy mountain breed. They help with heavy work and can navigate terrain that would break a lowland horse's legs." One of the ponies, a gray mare with intelligent eyes, approached the fence. Finn produced an apple from his pocket, offering it on his flat palm. The mare's soft lips tickled his skin as she accepted the treat. "This is Misty," he said. "She's the matriarch of the herd. Smart as they come." Zara watched the interaction with fascination. On Nexus Prime, her people had used technology for transportation, sleek vehicles that floated on anti-grav fields. The idea of partnering with living creatures for work was foreign, but oddly appealing. "May I?" she asked, reaching toward the mare. "Let her come to you," Finn advised. "Ponies are good judges of character." Misty studied Zara with large, dark eyes before stepping closer. Her breath was warm against Zara's palm as she investigated the newcomer's scent. After a moment, the mare allowed herself to be petted, her coat thick and soft beneath Zara's fingers. "She likes you," Finn observed with approval. They spent the morning touring the farm. Finn showed her the vegetable gardens, explaining the cycles of planting and harvest. He demonstrated how to collect eggs from the chickens, how to check the fences for damage, how to read the weather patterns in the cloud formations over the peaks. It's not glamorous work, he said as they paused beside a field of grain, mostly. It's repetitive, sometimes backbreaking, but there's satisfaction in it. Growing things, caring for animals, working with your hands, it seems. Zara searched for the right words. Peaceful, grounded, very different from life aboard starships. Do you miss it? Space travel. The question stirred emotions she'd been suppressing. I miss the purpose, she said. Finally, the feeling that my skills mattered, that I was contributing something valuable to the galaxy. But mostly I miss my people, the shared understanding, the sense of belonging somewhere. Finn nodded thoughtfully. Belonging doesn't always come from blood or species, he said. Sometimes you find it in unexpected places. That afternoon, he began teaching her practical skills. How to mend a fence, how to properly groom a horse, how to recognize signs of illness in the livestock. Her hands, once delicate from a life of working with sophisticated navigation equipment, began to develop calluses. Her back ached from unfamiliar physical labor. But as the days passed into weeks, something remarkable happened. The constant tension that had gripped her since the exile began to ease. She found herself laughing at Finn's dry humor, looking forward to their evening conversations by the fire. She learned to read the mountain weather, almost as well as she'd once read stellar navigation charts. You're getting stronger, Finn observed. One evening as they sat on the porch, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky, that it was true. Regular meals and honest work had filled out her hollow cheeks, brought color back to her pale skin. More importantly, she felt stronger inside, less like a refugee fleeing catastrophe and more like a person building something new. Tell me about your people, Finn said quietly. What were they like? Zara was quiet for a long moment, gathering memories she'd been afraid to examine. We were harmonious, I suppose. Our whole society was built around connection, to each other, to the cosmos, to the flow of energy between worlds. We sang together, worked together, dreamed together, sang. Music was central to our culture. We believed that all of creation was a great symphony, and that each species, each world, contributed its own unique voice. Without thinking, she began to hum a melody from her childhood. Haunting, beautiful, filled with longing for home. Finn listened in respectful silence until the last note faded into the mountain air. That was beautiful, he said softly. It was a lullaby my mother sang, about the first Nexari who learned to navigate between stars. Following the songs, the cosmos whispered, to those who knew how to listen, would you teach me some of your songs? The request touched something deep in her heart, to share the music of her people, to keep some part of Nexari culture alive through this unlikely friendship. Yes, she whispered. I would like that very much. As they sat together under the alien stars, Zara began to understand what Finn had meant about belonging. It didn't come from sharing the same birth world or species. It came from shared experience, mutual respect, and the simple act of caring for one another. For the first time since the purge, she began to believe she might have found a home. Hearts into an ebb. Seasons turned with quiet beauty in the mountain valley. Summer brought long days of shared labor. Zara and Finn working side by side in the fields as she mastered the rhythms of earthbound life. Her hands, once soft from a life among the stars, grew strong and capable. Her laughter, rare at first, became a frequent sound that warmed Finn's heart in ways he hadn't expected. It was during the harvest season that things began to change between them. They were working late into the evening, gathering the last of the grain before an approaching storm, when Zara slipped on the wet ground. Finn caught her instinctively, his arms wrapping around her waist to steady her. For a moment they stood, frozen, pressed close together, her hands braced against his chest. The scent of rain hung heavy in the air, and lightning flickered on the horizon. But all Zara could focus on was the warmth of his body against hers, the way his eyes had darkened as he looked down at her face. Zara, he said softly, her name, barely audible over the rising wind. She should have stepped away, should have thanked him politely and continued working. Instead, She found herself rising on her toes, drawn by something stronger than logic or caution. Their lips met in a kiss that was tentative at first, then deeper as months of growing attraction finally found expression. The first drops of rain began to fall as they broke apart, both breathing hard. "We should," Finn began. "Yes," she agreed. Though neither of them moved, thunder rumbled overhead, and the rain began in earnest. They ran for the cabin, laughing breathlessly as they stumbled through the door, soaked and muddy. The fire had burned low in their absence, casting the room in shadows. "I should change," Zara said, suddenly shy. "These clothes are ruined." But as she turned toward the stairs, Finn caught her hand gently. "Zara, wait." His voice was uncertain. "What just happened? I don't want you to think I expect anything. You're safe here, no matter what." She turned back to face him, touched by his consideration even as desire pooled warm in her belly. "What if I want something?" she asked quietly. The question hung between them, loaded with possibility. Outside, the storm raged against the windows, but inside the cabin felt intimate and sheltered. "Then we should talk about it," Finn said, though his eyes were dark with want. "You've been through so much. I don't want to take advantage." She stepped closer, placing her hand over his heart. "You have given me everything: safety, purpose, kindness I thought I'd never know again. You've shown me that home isn't a place, there's us." "Zara, I'm not fragile, Finn. I'm not some broken thing you need to protect from your own feelings." She smiled, the expression transforming her face. "I'm a woman who's found someone worth loving. Despite everything that tried to destroy my capacity for love." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs tracing the elegant curves of her cheekbones. "You're extraordinary," he whispered, "beautiful, and strong and brave. And I've been falling for you since that first night when you looked at me like you couldn't believe someone had offered you kindness." This time when they kissed, there was no hesitation. Desire that had been building for months finally found release as they explored each other. With hungry mouths and gentle hands, Finn traced the silver markings that curved along her collarbone, natural patterns that caught the firelight like precious metal inlaid in her skin. "You're beautiful," he murmured against her throat. "Every part of you." She shivered at the reverence in his voice, at the way his lips followed the path of those silver traces. Her own hands explored the solid strength of his shoulders, the muscles earned through years of physical labor. They made love slowly, tenderly. By the light of the dying fire, Finn worshipped her body with a patience that brought tears to her eyes, showing her pleasures she'd never imagined. She gave herself completely, holding nothing back, trusting him with vulnerabilities she'd never shared with anyone. Afterward, they lay entwined on the thick rug before the fireplace, her head pillowed on his chest as his fingers combed through her dark hair. "I love you," she whispered into the quiet. "I didn't think I was capable of it anymore, after losing everything. But you've given me back pieces of myself I thought were gone forever. I love you too," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "More than I thought possible, more than I thought I deserved after Sarah." She lifted her head to look at him. "Your wife wouldn't want you to live the rest of your life alone. Love isn't finite. Having loved her doesn't make what we have less real." He pulled her up for another kiss, this one soft and full of promise. "Stay," he whispered against her lips, "not just tonight, always. Be my partner in this life we're building." "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, always." The storm passed during the night, leaving the mountain air clean and fresh. They woke tangled together, sunlight streaming through the windows to paint golden squares on the wooden floor. Zara stretched languidly, feeling more at peace than she had since childhood. "Good morning, my love," Finn murmured, pressing kisses to her shoulder. "Good morning." She turned in his arms, marveling at how natural this felt. "I used to dream of flying between the stars again. Now I think I found something better." "What's that?" "Being grounded, having roots, having you." They spent the morning in bed, talking and touching and learning each other's bodies in the full light of day. Finn marveled at the way her silver markings seemed to shimmer when she was aroused, how they formed intricate patterns that were unique to her alone. Zara delighted in the calluses on his hands, the evidence of honest work that spoke to his character. "I want to know everything about you," she said, tracing circles on his chest. "Your childhood, your dreams, what makes you laugh, We have time, he assured her, all the time in the world. But even as they spoke of the future, both knew that their peace was fragile. Zara was still technically a refugee, still wanted by various authorities. Their love was real, their commitment absolute. But the galaxy beyond their mountain valley remained dangerous. For now, though, they had each other, they had this moment, this love that had grown from desperation into something transcendent. And perhaps, Zara thought as she kissed her beloved under the morning sun, that was enough to build a future on **. New beginning message arrived on a cold autumn morning, delivered by a maintenance drone that had somehow tracked Zara to their mountain sanctuary. She stood in the kitchen, holding the small data crystal with trembling hands while Finn watched with growing concern. "What is it?" he asked quietly. "Communication from the Nexari Council in exile." She whispered, "I didn't know any of them were still alive." The holographic message materialized above the crystal, showing an elderly Nexari woman whose silver markings had faded with age, but whose eyes still burned with fierce intelligence. "Zara Veluneth," the woman said, using Zara's full ceremonial name. "I am Elder Kes Moranthi. If you receive this message, you are one of the 17 Nexari navigators confirmed to have survived the purge. We are gathering the remnants of our people on the frontier world of Heaven's Rest. Our knowledge, our culture, our very species will die unless we come together now." The hologram flickered, showing star charts and coordinates. "You have 3 months to reach the rendezvous point. After that, we move to deep space and will be impossible to find. The choice is yours, young navigator, but remember that you carry the memories of our home world within you. Don't let them die with you." The message ended, leaving silence that stretched between them like a chasm. Zara sank into a chair, the crystal falling from nerveless fingers. 17, she whispered. "Out of millions, only 17. Finn knelt beside her chair, taking her hands in his. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know." She looked at him with anguished eyes. "They're my people, Finn, the last of my kind. How can I abandon them?" "You wouldn't be abandoning them by choosing to stay here. You'd be honoring them by living the life you've built, by being happy. But I carry knowledge they need, navigation techniques passed down through generations, cultural memories that exist nowhere else." She pulled her hands free, pacing to the window. "If I don't go, part of our heritage dies forever." Outside, the first snow of winter was beginning to fall, dusting the mountain peaks with white. Finn watched her struggle, his heart breaking for the impossible choice she faced. "I'll go with you," he said suddenly. She spun around. "What?" "I'll go with you, to this Heaven's Rest. We'll face whatever comes together." "Finn, no, you don't understand. What you're offering, it would mean leaving everything, your family's land, your home, your entire life." "My life is you now," he said simply. "Wherever you are, that's home." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "You would do that? Leave your world for mine, in a heartbeat?" He stood and crossed to her, cupping her face in his hands. "But I won't make the choice for you, whatever you decide. I'll support. If you need to go alone, I'll understand. If you want to stay here, we'll make it work somehow. And if you want me beside you when you meet your people, then nothing in the galaxy will stop me from being there." She kissed him then, pouring all her love and gratitude into the connection. When they broke apart, she pressed her forehead against his. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "What if they don't accept you? What if they see our love as betrayal of our people? Then we'll prove them wrong. Love isn't betrayal. It's the continuation of life, the hope for the future your people need." Over the following days, they made their preparations. Finn arranged for neighbors to care for his livestock, sealed the cabin against winter storms, and gathered supplies for the journey. Zara spent hours meditating, preparing herself mentally for reunion with her scattered people. The night before their departure, they sat together on the porch despite the cold, wrapped in thick blankets and watching the stars. "I used to navigate by those stars," Zara said softly. "They were my guides, my companions on long voyages. Now they're just beautiful lights that remind me of home." "They're still your guides," Finn said. "They brought you here, to me. Now they're leading us toward whatever comes next. Do you think we're making the right choice?" "I think we're making the choice that honors both our pasts and our future." Your people need you. But they also need hope. They need to see that love survives, that new connections can be formed even after devastating loss. The next morning dawned clear and cold. They loaded their few possessions onto midnight and began the long trek down the mountain to the nearest spaceport. The journey would take them weeks, first to the frontier worlds, then into unexplored space where the Nexari survivors waited. As they paused at the ridge overlooking the valley, Zara took one last look at the farm that had become her sanctuary. "Thank you," she said softly to the land that had sheltered them. "We'll come back," Finn promised. "Someday, when your people are safe and settled, we'll come home." She turned to him with a smile that lit up her entire face. "Home isn't the farm, my love. Home is wherever we're together." They rode down into the valley, toward the spaceport and the unknown future that awaited them. Behind them, snow began to cover their tracks, but the love they'd built in that mountain sanctuary would endure whatever trials lay ahead. 3 months later, on the deck of a refugee transport ship, Zara stood with Finn as they approached Heavens. Rest, the planet hung before them like a jewel against the stars, blue and green and full of possibility. Around them, the other Nexari survivors whispered in their ancient language, sharing stories and memories that had survived the purge. Elder Cass approached them, her aged eyes taking in Finn with curiosity rather than hostility. "So," she said, in accented standard, "this is the human who stole our navigator's heart." "Actually," Zara replied with a smile, "I tried to steal his horse. He stole my heart in return." The elder laughed, a sound like silver bells. "Then he is wise beyond his species. Love is the rarest treasure in the galaxy, more precious than any navigation chart or stellar map." As their ship descended toward Heaven's Rest, Zara felt Finn's hand squeeze hers. Below them waited a new world, a new beginning for both her people and their love. The stars that had once guided her through the void now witnessed the start of something unprecedented, a union that bridged not just two hearts, but two worlds. She had begun this journey as a desperate thief, trying to steal transportation to safety. Instead, she had found something infinitely more valuable, a love that transcended species, circumstance, and the vast darkness between stars. And in finding that love, she had perhaps given her people the greatest gift of all, proof that hope could survive even the darkest night, and that sometimes the most precious things came from the most unexpected places. The ship touched down on Heaven's Rest as the system's star set behind distant mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold that reminded Zara of that first dawn. She'd awakened in Finn's cabin. She squeezed his hand and smiled. "Ready for our next adventure?" she asked. "With you, always," he replied, and together, they stepped forward into their future among the stars.